The Batman in the past few years has become, in many ways, one of the most influential comic book films in this decade. Matt Reeves, together with Matt Tomlin, Greg Fraser, Michael Giacchino, and countless others, have brought to life what I would argue is the definitive take on Batman and his world. Robert Pattinson is absolutely terrific in this movie, and the reception from fans has warranted the green light on a sequel, with The Batman Part 2 currently scheduled to release in October of 2026. Anyway, with that in mind, and The Penguin show airing on Max, I thought it was about time for me to update my sequel pitch from roughly 2 years ago now. Now, that original video was made before the airing of the Penguin series, and before we had any news on a Batman sequel set in this world. Whilst Reeves and Pattinson were adamant about wanting to continue the story of this world, and since then we've gotten our wish, with the sequel being greenlit and the world expanding with the Penguin series. So without further ado, here is my updated pitch for a sequel to Matt Reeves' The Batman. Now, before I can discuss my new ideas for a Batman sequel, I think it's a good idea to first look back on my original ideas and discuss them for those just joining in. So in my last idea for a Batman sequel, I titled it Fear of the Batman, in a callback to Reeves' work on the Planet of the Apes series. This idea saw Bruce taking to the skies in more ways than one with the Batwing to take on not just Alec Newman as Kirk Langstrom, aka Man-Bat, but also to fight Jamie Campbell-Bower as Dr. Jonathan Crane, aka the Scarecrow. You can go watch the sequel idea, which I think is still up on the channel. I'll put a link in the description below. Anyway, this pitch saw a progression of Bruce's character and how he's moved forward since the events of the first movie. My idea also included a significant passage of time. In the sequel, the flooding in Gotham has begun to fade away, but not enough for Bruce to head back to the ground level, which forces him to take to the skies in the Batwing so he can take on the Man-Bat. This story would end with Man-Bat himself dying due to his DNA becoming too mutated for his body to handle, and Batman managing to overpower Scarecrow and lock him up in Arkham Asylum. One thing I didn't actually reveal in that pitch was my idea for a post-credit sequence, where we see Bruce realising he cannot fight this war alone, and so he decides to take on more allies in this fight. With Gordon, Alfred, and the introduction of Lucius Fox, with them already being part of his team, he reads a newspaper report that reads, "Flying Grayson's dead in circus tragedy," and as you can tell, this would set up Dick Grayson to join Bruce in a third movie. Now, I'm sure a few of you might be wondering, why would I want to make another pitch for a Batman sequel when I've already done one? Well, simply because I think it needs updating. That story I do love and I'm happy with what I came up with. It's mainly due to a passage of time that I would like to make an updated variant of the story. Another reason for this video's purpose is simply down to more news and rumours emerging in relation to a sequel for the movie. Matt Reeves has recently been stating that Oz, aka the Penguin, would be one of the characters acting as a quote-unquote gateway into where the story of this universe goes next, and another rumour has stated that we could see a much colder setting in the sequel, obviously meaning we could see a snowy, frozen over Gotham in a snowstorm, which leads to more exciting opportunities for a Batman sequel, and this rumour helps to contrast the setting of the first movie. Now, in the context of Batman, moving forward can mean many things. Moving forward in the fight against crime, Bruce moving forward after the death of his parents, or one of his many sidekicks moving forward on their own journey. But in the context of the Reeves universe, moving forward means we need to see a progression of the world. At the end of the first film, Riddler, with the help of his cult following, stages a plan to assassinate Bella Real, the new mayor of Gotham City. This plan results in the Gotham seawalls being blown up and the city becoming flooded. In the Penguin show, we find out that the more financially stable areas of the city are now unaffected by the floods, whilst the more run-down areas of the city still remain affected. With these areas of the city flooded and the sequel supposedly being set in the wintry seasons, it's more than likely for us to see these run-down parts of Gotham that are still flooded freeze over, and that would very much contrast the very rainy setting of the first movie, which in my opinion could work. We could see how Gotham adapts to the harsh weather. Perhaps a lot of the elite members of the city, ideally the rich folk, could take to the skies in a series of blimps. Little animated series reference there for you folks. Now, Bruce could have also taken to the skies as well, because the icy streets may prove to be too much for the Batmobile to handle.
And now your blood runs as cold as mine.
Death is cold, Batman. I will turn your blood to ice.
Victor Freeze is one of those Batman villains that isn't really driven to his crimes out of villainy or insanity, but more or less out of desperation. Now, Victor was a scientist and was happily married to his wife of many years, Nora. Unfortunately, tragedy struck when Nora was diagnosed with an incurable illness, and Victor, in desperation of course, sought to put Nora in cryostasis to give both of them more time, for Nora to live and for Victor to find a cure. However, these plans derailed when Victor had an accident in his lab that condemned him to live in a sub-zero temperature. In most of the continuities, this is caused by Ferris Boyle, the CEO of GothCorp, who, depending on the continuity, is the responsible party for Victor's condition. This is the case in both the animated series and Arkham Origins. With the possible winter setting of this sequel, many people, myself included, have theorised that Mr. Freeze will make his grand return to the films, last being seen in Batman and Robin back in the 90s.
The Iceman cometh. You are not sending me to the cooler. What killed the dinosaurs? The Ice Age! Can you feel it coming? The icy cold of space.
Now, bringing Mr. Freeze into this grounded setting could prove to be easier than expected. We can keep the basis for Freeze's origins, that he was trying to find a cure for Nora and was injured in an accident that caused his body temperature to plummet, and that he had to stay in a sub-zero temperature or else he'll die. For the sequel, we can build upon that with the events of the first movie, with Victor perhaps being injured in the Gotham seawall explosions, which also damages his equipment for Nora. By the time the events of the Penguin come back round, Victor could have returned to his old GothCorp lab where he starts experimenting on Nora to cure her ailing illness. Now, this could prompt Victor to try and find some suitable organ donors for his wife, which could set up Batman's role, as he tries to find out who's responsible for the murders that Victor has been inadvertently committing. This kind of adds a layer onto the idea that all the Batman villains could be turned into serial killers in this world. I don't think that would work due to some of their fantastical natures, especially when it comes to villains like Poison Ivy, but Mr. Freeze I think we can kind of add in here, and we don't really have to make him a serial killer per se. Perhaps he's killing these people just out of desperation to find suitable organ donors for his wife. Now, regarding Victor's look in this movie, I don't want anything too manufactured, in a similar manner to Batman. In the Arkham games, he's had some kind of mechanised suit. In Arkham Origins, we get a heavily armoured suit, which made sense considering he cobbled together that suit as a temporary measure. Arkham City gave us something a little more polished off and somewhat realistic for the setting of the Arkhamverse. If anything, I actually liked Mr. Freeze's look in Arkham Knight, not too manufactured but more of a hazmat suit that I think could actually mesh well with the tone of this world. I do think, however, that Victor's cold gun should be more cobbled together instead to bring this villain into reality. Now, another important thing that I feel should be addressed is Bruce's character. Now, the movie does away with the usual billionaire playboy persona we're used to seeing in the comics and makes Bruce more of a recluse. He doesn't have Wayne Manor, he doesn't have access to Wayne Enterprises, nor is he running the company itself either. We do get a mention of the company itself here and there, but Bruce is not the CEO. Now, the first movie dealt with this wider conspiracy, and it's entirely possible we'll get a new one in this film, but on kind of a smaller scale. My idea ties more into Victor's origins as well. The central concept is that Ferris and the board of directors at GothCorp perhaps make some profits on the side by selling weapon blueprints to the criminals in Gotham, and maybe that's a way to tie Penguin into the story, and they then launder the money to seem legitimate. Victor could discover this and threaten to tell the authorities. As a method of keeping him silent, Ferris pulls the funding from Victor's department and fires him, thereby cutting Freeze off from trying to cure Nora. Victor eventually steals the cryogenics equipment and takes it to a warehouse near the seawalls, which then leads to his accident when Riddler blows up the seawalls. Anyway, going back to Bruce, we also need to see a progression of his arc from the first movie, and that means him stepping out of the shadows to lead Wayne Enterprises and rebuild Gotham for the better. Perhaps after Victor's defeat and the public reveal of GothCorp's money laundering, Bruce can provide free healthcare for all of Gotham, even the disenfranchised members of the community. And the other benefit is Bruce getting access to the Wayne Enterprises R&D wing. In the Batman mythos, Bruce uses his company's resources from the R&D wing to his advantage, adapting the tech to use as the Batman, and normally he has the aid of Lucius Fox, who runs that part of the company. In this movie, we can perhaps show that Bruce has progressed somewhat with his tech. Perhaps he's been tinkering with a new suit that's more polished and not cobbled together. The original suit is made from various materials, body armor, leather, and even some metal for the bat symbol, with the likely theory that Bruce used the gun that murdered his parents to build that symbol, which would be really cool if we get that retcon. and with Lucius's help and the access to Wayne Enterprises' R&D wing, Bruce is able to construct a new means of traversing the skies of Gotham in the Batwing. Now, the look of the Batwing has changed over the years in the comics, games and the movies, but I would love to see a Batwing that's closer in style to the one in Arkham Origins. In that game, Bruce, who coincidentally is in his second year of the Crusade, uses the Batwing as his primary means of getting around the city via the various radio towers, which I think would work really well for this movie as well. Like Bruce using the Batwing to traverse Gotham when the streets are too icy for the Batmobile. Now, the casting characters for this movie is also an important factor, as in this movie we get several members of the Batman mythos, including Bruce himself of course, Alfred, Selina Kyle, James Gordon, Carmine Falcone, the Penguin, and of course the film's main villain, the Riddler, who in the Arkham games is probably one of the biggest arseholes ever. Swiftly moving on, in this movie I would love to see some more additions. If we're giving Bruce access to Wayne Enterprises, then it makes sense to introduce Lucius Fox as a new ally, so that Bruce has someone to help upkeep repairs on his tech. Regarding the GCPD side of things, I think Harvey Bullock and Renee Montoya would be worthwhile additions, mainly because Gordon has likely become the new police commissioner by this point, and someone has to take his place as the lieutenant, and Harvey Bullock, in my opinion, fills that role. Montoya is also an important addition, having made her official debut not in the comics, but rather in Batman the Animated Series, which is also similar to the idea of Harley Quinn. She made her debut in the films and then debuted in the comics. Regarding the more villainous side of Gotham, I'm keeping Colin Farrell's Penguin because Oz will likely be an established crime boss by this stage, depending on how the Penguin show turns out. As a note, this video was written and recorded before the show itself wrapped up. And as a side note, I would also like to include the Riddler in here as well. I think it's already been confirmed that Paul Dano is going to return in some capacity. Now, in the deleted scene from the movie, we see Bruce use the Joker as a quote-unquote consultant for the Riddler murders, and I think it would be more of a natural progression for Bruce to instead go to Riddler for this kind of thing. Now, perhaps in the sequel, Riddler plays a more Hannibal Lecter-esque role for Bruce, giving him the clues on certain cases, and maybe is the one to point him in the direction of Gothcorp, which ultimately leads to Freeze himself. Now, regarding the casting of new characters, here's who I would go for. For Harvey Bullock, I think Mark Shepard would be a great choice. For Renee Montoya, Stephanie Beatrice is definitely a must. That's a popular fan cast, I think. For Lucius Fox, I'm going to go Ernie Hudson. I think that was a rumour that James Gunn debunked. I still like that idea. For Ferris Boyle, I'm going to go with Richard Burgi. He's quite a well-known actor. And for Nora Freeze, I'm going to go with Deborah Ann Woll, who you might know from the Daredevil Netflix show. And that brings us to Mr. Freeze. Now, we can go through several fan casts, but I think the actor who fits the role of Victor the best is Michael Fassbender. Now, I go for Michael mainly because he can play the sympathetic villain / anti-hero role very well. In the X-Men films, Eric is portrayed as a villain fueled not by simply being evil, but because of the tragedy in his origins. It's that ability to portray a tragic villain that makes me think Michael would be a brilliant fit to play such a tragic villain like Mr. Freeze. So the movie is going to take place a little after the Penguin series, where Oz has established himself as the new crime boss in Falcone's place. It's currently winter in Gotham, with snowstorms becoming frequent and in now flooded areas of Gotham freezing over. Bruce, since the previous movie, has begun improving his tech, having modified the Batmobile to withstand the harsher climates. The movie is essentially a detective story, yet again like the first film, as Bruce works with Gordon, Harvey Bullock and Renee Montoya to track down a new killer. This new killer has been freezing people with modified liquid nitrogen and then harvesting their organs. The investigation leads Bruce to different corners of Gotham, including Penguin in a similar manner to the first movie, but the difference here would be that Oz and Batman are both more familiar with each other now. Bruce would eventually visit Riddler and Arkham, who says that this Mr. Freeze isn't intentionally killing these people, but rather just taking their organs. To cut a long story short, because I couldn't do a pitch like this justice, Batman finds Mr. Freeze in a warehouse near one of the seawalls, and we find out why Freeze unintentionally killed those people. He was trying to save his wife Nora. Batman discovers why Freeze became like this and the reasoning behind it, and after promising Freeze that he won't be prosecuted, Batman consults with Gordon, and after collecting the evidence, Ferris Boyle is arrested for his crimes, and the board of directors vote for the company to be acquired by Wayne Enterprises. The end of the movie would see Bruce looking over the still snowy Gotham as he jumps off the building and into the Batwing as he flies away into the night. An end credit scene would see Batman visiting the Riddler in prison as part of a new case. After handing over the files, Riddler reads the message that was carved into the victim. They watch you at your hearth, they watch you in your bed. Speak not a whispered word of them, or they'll send the talon for your head.
Bro, you gotta go read Court of Owls.
Court of Owls is the best one.
I didn't
The Court of Owls, in my opinion, is one of the more fascinating aspects of the Batman mythos to be introduced in the comics from the past decade or so, and I think it would be a massive missed opportunity if Matt Reeves doesn't find some way to incorporate them into this universe in one way or another. We have gotten them in the Batman vs. Robin animated film and in the Gotham Knights game, but we haven't seen them in the live-action movie, at least not yet. I could actually see Bruce eventually uncovering this conspiracy in a possible adaptation of Scott Snyder's Court of Owls storyline, with some creative liberties, namely because that story has the Bat family in it, and it does seem like we won't be getting the entirety of that roster in the Reeves-verse. Anyway, that very much concludes my own pitch for the Batman Part 2. I think this is the closest I could get to what Reeves might have planned because of the rumoured setting of a wintry Gotham, and if that's not foreshadowing for Mr. Freeze, then I don't know what the hell is. Anyway, if you guys did enjoy this video, then be sure to like it and share it around. If you guys have your own ideas for what you'd want to see in a Reeves Batman sequel, then let me know in the comments below. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe and stick around for more videos like this one. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you very soon.